This specific encounter took place between August 2014 to May 2015. So unfortunately, I was never really close to my grandfather at all, mostly because when I was a baby, my parents emigrated to the UK, and since I was so young, I hadn't really ever spoken to him. We talk over the phone, rarely, and when we did, it was always comforting to know he was alive since he spent the last years of his life feeling poorly. I believe he died in 2010, in April, exactly a month shy of his birthday. At this time, I was still living in the UK. My mom was on the phone with her brother that night, whom was present physically in the same room when my granddad passed back in our home country. It was quite sad, and I remember it like it were yesterday. My family, especially my mum, was very upset and perturbed. She flew back to our home country for the funeral and stayed there a few days. She stayed longer due to the eruption of a volcano in Iceland in the same year that stopped practically all air traffic. So, fast forward to the summer of 2014. At this point, my family have already permanently moved back to our home country. My uncle, who is my mum's brother and my grandfather's son, obviously, one day decided he wanted to put something on my granddad's grave. Something other than flowers, since they didn't last long. He went out and bought this white angel and some paints for us to use. Since I'm quite artistic and into that sort of stuff, I agreed to help him. We spent at least 2 days on it, one to paint it, the other to let it dry completely. Both of us really tried hard to make it look good, especially me, since I felt like it would be a way to show that I respected him, despite our very non-acquainted relationship. Once we were satisfied with the results, we went to the graveyard and placed the angel next to his tombstone. Since a bit of the lettering on the actual tombstone was fading, I had also brought along a black paint to fill the words in while we were there. About a week later, it's Sunday, and my uncle goes to church practically every week. That day, after church had finished, he decided he wanted to visit the graveyard to check on our angel. When he arrived, he found it was completely missing. He went around the small graveyard to see if somebody had possibly moved it, but it was nowhere to be seen. When my uncle informed me, I was super angry and sad. I couldn't understand how somebody could be so cruel, stealing something off someone else's grave. It was so disrespectful. I genuinely felt bummed that we'd put in so much work and effort for somebody else just to grab it and go home. The following week, every time I would leave the house, I'd try and take a peek into other people's gardens to check if it was there. Failed, never found it. We tried to look on the bright side, and we assumed that whoever stole it took it because it looked good, since many other graves also had little statues of angels and ornate candles. Unfortunately, stealing is still a problem in my rather quiet and small neighborhood to this day. Houses are still being robbed, and just last year, somebody had the cheek to steal a gold necklace that was around the neck of Mary Magdalene in our church. Anyway, after 2 weeks we realized it was definitely not going to show up. I had my own suspicions. There was this old lady in my neighborhood, notorious for being quite the kleptomaniac, and I instantly thought of her. Obviously, I never proved it. Sometime in April 2015, my family were at my grandma's house eating dinner when the doorbell rang. My uncle, as per usual, went to answer it and found that nobody was outside. He got a little angered, thinking that the kids next door were playing stupid pranks on us. The doorbell didn't ring again after. When I later left, it was as I was exiting the house that I realized the angel was outside. It was a little hidden, just to the left of the door, so my uncle probably couldn't see it when he opened it. It was in the exact same condition we left it in, meaning it was probably left indoors. We never found out who put it back, But what was creepy about the situation was that our angel was delivered on the exact date that my grandfather died. We were all very shocked, since we believed somebody was playing a really mean trick on us. We didn't take the angel back to the graveyard, fearing it'd be nicked again. But my uncle did tell our priest about it. The priest told my uncle that apparently they had found weird pouches filled with what seemed like herbs and incense scattered around the graveyard. I'd heard of a few rumors that there were old ladies practicing witchcraft in my town, but nobody knew who could be doing such a thing. Portuguese people are quite superstitious, may I mention. When the priest was informed that the angel that was once on my grandfather's grave was oddly returned on the anniversary of his death, he suggested not to keep it in sight, fearing that maybe those witches had something to do with its mysterious disappearance in the first place. My uncle agreed, better safe than sorry, and the angel is currently sitting in my grandma's shed, right at the back. It might seem a bit weird, but for some reason, I always found graveyards intriguing. I hope I don't sound horribly morbid. And when my family would go visit my grandfather, I'd wander off and see practically every tombstone in the place, and really just read people's names, the date they died, etc. I'd also visit my paternal grandparents' graves. One day in May of the same year, when my mum, my dad, and I were at a cafe pretty close to the cemetery, a person they knew arrived and they started chatting, and I found myself bored. My mum realized that it was about 5:10 p.m., so my mum instructed me to place the flowers she had brought on my grandfather's grave, since she and my dad were talking to this guy. The graveyard opens every day at 8 a.m. and closes at 5 p.m., and it is literally 1 minute away from this cafe. So I crossed the road with the flowers in my hand when suddenly, at the entrance, I was able to see that somebody was hunched down close to my grandfather's grave. From afar I could tell it was an old woman whom I did not recognize, and she seemed to be very enthralled by the sight. So much so, I know that she grabbed one of the wax candles sitting nearby. She didn't notice me at first, since she was quite far, but she soon spotted me, and by the look on her face she was very frightened. She looked as if she recognized me. Since I had no idea who she could be, and since I also felt a little unsettled by her presence, I ran back to the cafe and told my mum about the woman. At that moment she was still busy chatting with that friend of hers, and so she did not go straight away. There were 5 minutes left before the cemetery closed when my mum finally decided to come with me to see this supposed unknown woman. Almost coincidentally, the lady was gone. We ventured to the grave and found that the candle I aforementioned was missing. Coincidence? After describing her to my mum, she was sure she had never seen that woman before, and she was most likely to blame for the angel's disappearance, too. To this day, we still have no idea who the woman is, but I have always thought of the possibility that maybe my grandfather had a lover, and since she felt upset or angered that he was married to my grandmother, stealing things off of his grave made her feel better, or allowed her to get revenge. I don't know. But the look on her face still creeps me out. I'm certain she knew who I was. This happened to me back in 2008 when I was 16 years old. I was pretty high at the time, so I could have just been having a bad trip and being paranoid. But I've thought about it a lot, and I feel like I just managed to escape a dangerous situation. I just turned 16, which is kind of a big deal, and instead of being at home celebrating with my friends, I was stuck in a town hundreds of kilometers away from them. It was a beautiful, vibrant town. I just didn't know anyone there, except for Dave. He was 21 years old, and I really did not know him well. I had met him once when he was visiting my hometown, But I was lonely, and as a 16-year-old, spending your birthday alone is literally the worst thing. So I was desperate to have some fun. Dave invited me to go to an overnight trance festival with him and his friends. At first, my mom was completely against the idea, but Dave agreed to meet up with my family, and I pretended to know him a lot better than I really did. He was a very mild-mannered and charming boy, and this, coupled with the fact that my mom felt bad for my 16th birthday being so shitty, was enough to convince my mom to let me go. I was so excited. I was going to my first festival, and with older guys. It was going to be the best birthday ever. The festival was being held in the middle of a wooded area, about an hour's drive away from where I was staying with my parents. This is relevant later. I had never met Dave's friends, but they seemed okay. The one guy made me feel a little uncomfortable. He kept on looking at me like I was food. We will call him Mike, because I don't remember his name. I wasn't going to let that ruin my evening, though. The night started with us smoking some weed, which I was no stranger to. Then they convinced me to snort some MDMA. It was my first time, but I was no stranger to drugs, so I obliged. We then went to the dance floor, and I had a blast. I was way too high to care about anything but the music, and the way it felt to move my body. I started feeling a little overwhelmed being in the thick of it, so I moved off to the side, where I could still hear and dance to the music, but be a bit more chilled. I slowly became aware of a conversation taking place behind me. The voice was saying odd things. Man 1. See that girl? She's one of my girls. She knows how to treat you right. Just see how well she moves. Man 2. She does look good. The first man then goes on to describe all the things his girl can do. Some pretty intense sexual things. I was like, man, this girl sounds hardcore. I even looked around to try and spot her. There were a couple of ladies nearby, but I had no idea of knowing which one it was, so I just carried on dancing. After a while, the first man encouraged the other to go and dance with this girl, and she would give him a taste of what she can do. And to my surprise, this man comes and tries to start dancing with me. I stopped dead, looked at him, and then turned around to see who was calling me his girl. And there's Mike, standing and leering at me. I'm standing there in shock when Dave rushes over, whispers, "We have to go," and pulls me off the dance floor. I go with him, thinking of him as my savior, and he takes me over to some jungle gyms overlooking the festival. I managed to find a comfortable corner of the jungle gym, and was just enjoying the evening air, the fire dancers, and the distant dance floor, when I spot Mike fairly close by in an animated conversation with the guy from earlier. The guy finally hands over some money, and I was just puzzling this over when Dave and his friends come over to the place I was happily ensconced. They surround me and offer me a line of something. I ask what it is, but they don't tell me, so I decline. There are 4 of them standing very, very close to me, completely trapping me as I have a pole at my back. One is shining a torch in my face, and they will just not take no for an answer. They badgered me for what felt like 10 minutes before I finally gave in. As soon as I take the line, Dave says we should head to the car. I was already way too suspicious to ever want to go to the car. So I asked if I could just go and dance real quick, and then I'd go with them. I ran off to the dance floor, pretending to be excited to get dancing, and pushed my way right into the thick of the crowd. From there, I worked my way to the front and then slipped into the surrounding woods. I hid behind the closest tent and tried to plan out what to do next, when my phone blew up with texts and calls from them asking where I was. I had literally been gone for like 2 minutes. Why were they so worried? I began moving stealthily from one tent to the next, hiding behind trees and being extremely paranoid. As I was switching hiding places, I heard two guys approaching, so I dove into some bushes. I had no idea who they were, and I was about to ask them to help me, when I heard the one describing my exact outfit and description to the other. I was so scared. I had never seen those two amongst the group I was with. How did they know who I was, and why were they looking for me? I just had no idea what to do. I was scared that if I phoned my mom, I would get into huge trouble, and who knew how long it would take her to get there. I had no idea who to trust and no plan. I just continued moving through the woods, feeling hopeless and terrified, when I spotted a campfire. I ran towards it, and when I emerged, there was a group of about 15 very high-looking hippies, jamming music and having a good time. So I sat with them. They welcomed me warmly and let me sit with them for the remainder of the night. I didn't tell them what was going on. I wasn't sure I believed it myself. After a few hours, Dave finally found me and tried to get me to leave with him. I refused, so we just sat there until sunrise. I called my mom to come and fetch me. I didn't want to call her at an ungodly hour. I went home and never spoke to Dave again. So Dave, Mike, and the rest of your crew, I never ever want to meet you again. Edit. Thank you so much for your kind words. For those of you asking why I didn't report them, I wish I had. Unfortunately, I'd been let down by adults before this, and mostly just blamed myself for what happened. I wish I could report them now, but 1, I don't know their surnames, and 2, I live in a country where the police force is worse than useless. For some background, myself and my significant other are both legally blind. I'm a man, and she's a woman. It was New Year's Eve 2014, going to 2015, and we went to a local small town for the evening. We went to dinner. Note, I had no alcohol as I was under 21 at this point. After which we were going to go for a stroll by the seaside, on a narrow, somewhat empty, beach that goes the length of this town. To get to the beach, you walk right out of the restaurant, go right around the building, then turn left at the next block, and go downhill for about a quarter mile or so. This last stretch is lined with houses, but at this point, all the lights were off, and no one looked to be home in any, or at least not awake. We turned right outside the restaurant, and halfway along the building I noticed footsteps behind us. Typically, this doesn't matter at all. Sometimes other people walk along this stretch, but it's pretty rare. I have no idea why, but these steps just seem to be heavy and out of place. My significant other and I start walking quicker, and I pretend to pop my neck, trying to see if I can see anything behind us. I can't, but I can hear the person is catching up, even though we sped up. At a corner, there are some beautiful floral displays, well lit with special LED lights, and my significant other wants to take a few pictures. Not wanting to alarm her, I don't say anything about the guy, and we stop to snap some pictures. After a moment, the guy catches up to us, and in a very thick London accent, says, "Top of the evening to you." We both get a weird vibe from this guy, and he does seem to be high on something. He doesn't smell of weed or alcohol, so my best guess is mushrooms or something. We talk to him for a minute, then excuse ourselves, and start walking away, still hoping to go to the beach. He notices our canes and says, "My God, are you blind?" Yes, we're visually impaired. One of us, I forget which one, tells him. He sounds like a man that just discovered how to turn water into wine. "My God,
I had no idea you two were blind. Are you both blind? How much can you see?
He keeps following us for a block or two, continuing with the questions. He asks where we're from, and we tell him we're locals to the area, which is only partly true, as we're from another local small town near the same big city. We get to a crossroad where we either walk to the beach or walk back to the heart of town. We stop and tell him we're going back to town and we'll see him later. Well, he doesn't want us to go. He tells us that he wants our help, since we must know our way around because we go everywhere from memory. He tells us that his ex-wife lives in town and he needs our help finding her house. And he's pretty sure it's the way we were walking, onto a pretty quiet beach. In his defense, there are houses along the beach, and at the end there is another street, with even more houses. But it didn't seem like he wanted our help. We got the vibe that he wanted us somewhere alone. We ask him where the house is, and he doesn't know the address. He tells us what street he thinks it's on, and we give him crystal clear directions that a 5-year-old could understand. Literally, walk 10 steps forward and turn right. Even numbers on the left, odd numbers on the right. He starts describing the house and says it will be dark, because she's probably asleep. We tell him we can't see the houses, so we can't help.
Well, I'm sure you can help me, let's just try. There's a sign near it about deaf kids or something.
Note, I've never heard of deaf people in this town before, and think he may have been just making fun of us at this point. We start walking away, and he continues following us, until we get to the heart of town, with groups of people everywhere. At which point he finally gives up. So, to the random British stranger wanting to lead 2 blind people into the darkness, alone. Yeah, stay away. Stay very, very far away. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to episode 53. Well, I'm currently nosing around on Amazon, just trying to decide if the mic I'm about to order is definitely the one I want. It is, really, but, I may as well look at other options before I finally place that order. Hopefully I'll have that in time for next week, because I want to use that to record my next special video. It's much better quality than you're currently hearing. It'll take me a day or two to get used to it, to try the settings, mic placement, that sort of thing. But it's definitely going to be worth it in the long run. Okay, let me think. What's the plan for the week? Well, tomorrow will either be a fairy tale or... I do have this one subscriber story. It's very long, very detailed. It might shock some people, the content of it, but I hope you'll listen to it impartially and take it for what it is. I think it really does deserve its own video. So I might put that in its own video for Tuesday. If not, then I'll probably do it later in the week. Then on Wednesday, of course, there'll be more True Scary Stories. Thursday, something. Haven't decided yet. And Friday is probably going to be paranormal again. I have got a couple of collaborations coming up, so I'll be recording stories for those, and when the other person's part of that collaboration comes in, that will go up as another video. But one a week, so maybe one this week or next week, and then one the week after. I think that's the best way to work it. Don't want to put too many up at once. My channel certainly isn't huge, but if I'm going to take the time to feature someone on my channel, I should give the video a little time to circulate. Okay. Oh dear, that's almost 2 minutes I've been rambling for. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.